So before going in detail on Vensim, and I hope you will enjoy to play with the simple model, just a few considerations. So we were really, the objective of this model was really to make it as simple as possible. But you see that this one is the economy view that you discuss with Guilherme, at least some of it. And but then you remember that in day 2 we also introduce so the ecology, at least some constraint of the food production. And what we are going to do today, so is really to understand how policy can shape this model, and if we can solve some of the problems that we encountered in the scenarios until now. So these are the policies. So you see the new view that we will show in a while in the events. Okay. So just a few considerations before starting. So probably some of you already know the Kai identity. I think almost all of you. And what is important here is that at least for the objective of reducing CO2 emission, we have different possibilities. So the first one is, so the drivers of the emission is, of course, the population that we are not, at least considering to control through policies, at least in this very simple model. But the other are GDP per capita. Okay, that is, of course, the affluence of the society. While then we have two issues connected to technology. The first one is energy to GDP. This means in particular efficiency. No? So how much we are good in producing value of GDP with energy. And the second one is carbon intensity of energy use. So here, how much we are good in producing energy with low level of CO2 emission. So we will try, at least for the emissions, to work on technology here. And also at the end, we discuss shortly what's going on if we can reduce, if not the GDP, at least the consumption of people, just to see what's going on. Okay. So this, of course, would be one important, way through which we try to reduce the impact of our society on emission. And then, of course, we know that there are other things. So this is probably some data that you know very well, one of the most important publications in the last about sustainability. And Wiedemann and others will show that the material footprint of our GDP is not declining in most of the rich countries, in particular in Europe. You see that there is no decoupling at all. So for this reason, it's important, even in this simple IM model that we built together, to be able to include some material footprint through this simple equation about the materials that we use. This allows us to understand if there are a possibility of reducing, to reduce the intensity of the material use of our GDP. And we will see that there are still limits on this process. The last one, as a sort of things that we'd like to meet, is about the role that has inequality, and which is the carbon inequality. These are quite famous images made from Oxfam, but it's based on Rostrom data on Stockholm Institute. And you will see that it's really the richest seems the responsible of the increase in emission in the last years. And this means that the idea of redistributing resources in order to reduce inequality is something that probably is not so costly in terms of emission, or at least this can be something to be discussed. So it means that if you're going to think how to reduce inequality in our simplified model, we can find some policies, and we will see which are the consequences in terms of the emission. Okay. So the last point that I think is interesting, among the idea of policies that we have on reducing the impact is for sure the issue of reforestation and carbon storage. And these are some data coming from what we are able to do in the last 20 years. And you will see that this is not really enough for reducing, the deforestation that we have. So it means that also in these, in these policies, we can have some good results, especially sort of adaptation to climate change, if you want to reduce the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. But of course, we are still far from something that can be changing the the actual rate of deforestation. So these are a bit the main stylized fact that we use in order to think about policies, even in our toy model. And a bit more clearly, so what we'll try to do today is to introduce some policy objectives. So the first policy objective is about emission reduction. This is the first slide about the Kaya identity. What we will try to do in the VANSIM is to do two things. From one side, to increase renewables, that is the policies that can help us in improving this coefficient, this driver of emissions, so the quantity of CO2 that you need for producing 1 unit of energy. And the second one is through energy efficiency. So we are lucky that the model is simple, so it's very easy to understand how energy efficiency can matter here. It means for, I mean, the amount of energy that you use for any unit of output is declining. Okay, so this will be the assumption that we are doing introducing this policy. Then I told you that one other important issue is inequality. So we will see which is the measure of inequality that we have in the model, that is just the labor share. And we'll try to understand if two different policies can matter. So the first one is wage increase, and the second one is a sort of unemployment reduction through working time reduction. Okay, and we will see again how in a very, very simplified way we can introduce it. Then I told you that I think that one important part of the story passed through our ability to dematerialize. And here we do two things. From one side, we try to increase our ability to recycle materials. And the other one is quite similar to energy efficiency increase. That means reduction in material intensity in the economy. So if it is possible to dematerialize somehow the output in a way that is different from what we have historically, at least until now, in the most richer country in the world. And finally, the last objective that we have is to try to increase adaptation. Here we assume two possible levers. The first one is to reduce climate damage. So in particular, to make our stock of capital more resilient to climate change. And the second one is through reforestation. It is the things that we are trying to discuss here. So the idea today is if we are able to work on this direction to reach something that can be thought about a sustainable economy, something like that. And we will see that even in a very simplified model, the things are not easy. Okay. Right. So probably I'll try to present you what we have done in VANSIM. So do you have any big questions? So some of you check the economy view, that is this one, and realize that there is something that is not clear at all. We want to ask something in particular on it, or I can try to go on and maybe we'll discuss the... Okay, the Zoom in VANSIM is always a bit demanding, let's say. Okay, I try to go on. I don't know, there are a few questions on the chat. Okay. Right, so what I've done here is just to make this modelization of the policies. The policies are quite clear because are the green variable on all the views. And if you go down, you will see that at the end there is a new view that is policy objectives and policies. And if we made a bit bigger, okay. So you will see these are the first two policies that have to do with the reduction of emissions. Okay. And we made these two assumptions. So how to model an expansion of renewable energy sources in our model. So what we have assumed is something really simple. So just to make a sort of how the methods here. So you have a variable that is just 0, 1. Okay. So if it is 0, the policy is not entering, so it's not active. Or if you put 1, so these are the bottom 0, 1, you activate the policy. And then when you go here, you will say that maybe there is a time where the policy is activated. And so you can say that only when the time of the simulation is bigger than the time in which you are introducing the policies, then the value of, so the policy is really activate, okay? So maybe there are more, concepts or more efficient way of presenting it, but it works pretty well. So I think it's also easy to understand what's going on. So now what happens if you activate the REST expansion? You can see here. So this active REST expansion goes directly in, I hope you can read it, I don't know. So, okay. It introduces a new investment in renewables. So it seems that, what we are assuming here is that there is a decision of the society to invest more on renewable energy, and this increase the investment in renewable. Something really simple. If we go here there are the investment in renewables that are down on the left part. Okay, so you see that this is the variable that depends on the activate REST that increase the post. So to see how much this is increasing, we can, okay, I think it's fine like that. You will see that when the REST expansion is introduced, there is an increase of 50. So 50, the investment increased by 50, okay? So, and here you see that this will induce an increase in the investment in renewables, okay? Then we can go on and to see other policies. So the second one, even about efficiencies, energy efficiencies, the way in which this model is exactly the same, okay? So the question is where this policy goes. If you use these three, you can see that the efficiency matters for energy efficiency and goes in the ratio between energy intensity, in the energy intensity output. So this means that what we are assuming is that we are able to increase the efficiency. Okay, it's better here. Sorry, in the ecology, because this is the demand. Okay, and you see that here there is the energy intensity output that in this case depend on the new parameter that reduces the intensity of the output. Okay, so we are assuming to be good enough in doing this job. And in this case, if you compare, you see that when you introduce energy efficiency, the efficiency almost reduces by half at the end of the period of simulation. Okay, so this is a quite strong increase in efficiency, and we can see if this is enough to make the, the limits of energy farther, let's say. Okay, so if you want, we can just show what happens with these two policies. In order to do so, I have to to avoid. So these are all the policies that we enter. So let's do a check with the first two. Okay, so the baseline, the RES, and the energy efficiency. Okay, so they are introducing one by one. Okay, they're not together. So if you see what happens in the output, so you will see that in the baseline, there is a boundary here that, again, is the boundary of the material in this case. And if you see that energy efficiency does not change so much the level of output, while, the expansion of RES make the output increasing a bit because there are more investment, and these end up in limiting the material limits to be more strict. And this is quite clear also because the material demand that we have, okay, sorry, that is this one. So here, if you see the potential output with the materials, is declining more rapidly because, as you know, as you remember from the day two, the renewable energy are intensive of material. So is this additional link that we assume here. So the increase in investment make more strict, the investment in renewables make more strict the limits on materials. Okay. So at the same time, we can see if there are some change, but there will be a few change in the economy. So just to let you know, which is the other variable that you want to check is labor share as a measure. So this is the labor share about income, that goes to workers. And you see that this is decreasing, and this investment in renewables, so energy efficiency does not change so much the distribution in our toy economy, let's say. Okay. So another question can be what happens if we are considering other objectives. So the first one is about inequality. So maybe we can think that from one side, we would like to have a society that guarantee a higher level of income to the poorest. In particular, in this case, you see that there is this reduction in the labor share that is due to the way in which capital accumulation works. And so what we can do are two different policies. One is working time reduction, and the other one is an increase in wage. So working time reduction is implemented quite simply here, because in order to get the employment, what we do is the output divided by the labor productivity. Okay. So in order to assume that we are reducing the working hours, the only thing that we are doing is to make this equation a bit more complicated, but not so much. That instead of having a denominator only the labor productivity as before, we add also the working time reduction. This means that the level of employment that you need, the number of jobs, is increasing proportionally to the reduction of working time. This has another implication that is important in terms of consumption, that since we are not changing the wage, the annual wage, it means that is a reduction of working time to so the salary is the same as before. Okay, so we are giving to the worker a higher, so I mean globally a higher income, and this should improve, the labor share. Okay. The second is wage growth policies. This is very simply introduced, is that we increase the wage rate, okay, by 1% per year, because remember, this is annual wage, so the annual wage is increasing by the growth wage 1% per year, starting from the period where the policy is implemented. Okay, so I share it with you again. So this is activate wage increase. This increase is activated in period 10. Okay, so if we try to see what happens with these two policies, so I already ran the simulation, but you can run by yourself. It's just putting one in the policy. So here, if you put one to act wage and you simulate the model, you will see what happens, which is the effect of wage increase. If you act working time reduction, you will see which is the effect of the increase of the reduction of working hours. Okay, so let's do first as I presented. So if we go here in the economy, what happens to the labor share now is quite interesting. So sorry for that. So the labor share, you see, with working time reduction, with respect to the baseline, you have an increase in the labor share, but not a change in the path. So it means that this increase in wage is helpful for reducing, inequality, let's say, but does not change the direction of this, so the reduction of the labor share in the long run. While when you increase the wage, it seems that there is a full change in the dynamics of the model. And you will see that in terms of unemployment, instead, you have, this is the working time reduction. So working time reduction increases a lot of employment, okay? While, the wage growth at the beginning tend to have some counterfactual, so the reduction here, and then is increasing. But both, you see that they're not changing. They're making a higher consumption level, a higher output, and this, of course, make the limits of the material stuff that is here a bit before, okay? So this is something is a sort of trade-off. You want to start to reduce emission, to reduce the inequality. You start to maybe increase the income of the poorest, the laborers, but the laborers are the consumption of laborers in share is higher than the consumption of capitalists or the capital income, and this induces an increase in consumption. So the society end up first in the constraint, in this case, in the material constraint. Okay, and so this is quite clear here. So if you see the output, but of course, is everything quite? I think it's quite clear if you understood how it works. So it seems that there is still this trade-off. So I was saying we are not taking into consideration the fact that inequality is much different. So we are not able to differentiate how the consumption patterns make a difference in this scenario. So I mean, you remember the Oxman, the dinosaur graph. It seems that we could have something better than an increase in emission, like in this case. So you see, sorry for looking at the emissions that you have. We can come back to the CO2 emission, and you see that both policies tend to increase emission. Okay, wage growth a bit higher than working time reduction. This means that also the impact of climate change will be higher, okay, with the wage growth with respect to the baseline. Okay, so this is a big, an important trade-off, and we try to understand if we can deal with it in a way. So then again, what we have done, we also introduced, so it seems that here the most important constraint is the material. And I think this one is one of the most interesting results that we have in this toy model. So let's start with the efficiency. Of course, efficiency is working pretty well. I mean, what we are doing is something really simple. Again, I don't know how realistic, but imagine that we are able to reduce the intensity, the material intensity of output. And this is done formally in this way. So there is a reduction. So this was the coefficient before of the material intensities. We say that when the policies introduces, there is a reduction, a percentage reduction in the material intensity of output. Okay, so this is the policies that depends. So it's almost again a reduction, an increase in efficiency of 50% at the end of simulation. Okay, starting from period 10, that is the period when we introduce the policy. So which is the result? Again, what we have to do in this case is just to keep this scenario, and we can compare the two. So you see that the material intensity change. So we are reducing almost by half at the end of the simulation. Okay, so this means that we go to see the material demand is declining a lot, and this helps us in pushing the limits a bit beyond. Not enough to avoid the material boundary in period, so close to period 80, but however much better than the initial scenario, the baseline. Okay. So of course, there is any other important change. I don't think there is a big other big change. Of course, this allows us to have the crisis of the boundary much later, so output can increase. And this, of course, will tend to increase emission and probably the damage of climate change. You look that here there is the stop due to the limits. Here the limits come later, so there will be much higher climate change. Remember that climate change here making, destroying the capital, so tend to sustain, a bit of investment because the capitalist has to increase investment in order to maintain the capacity utilization. So you see that here the capacity utilization decline for the limits here go on for a while and start to decline after period 80 when we cross the boundary. And okay, so what about the output I show you? Okay, it's quite clear what happens here in terms of the employment. Of course, the things are improving a bit. Okay, because you are ending up a bit later, but there are no big changes in the other variable. Okay, so here we can, before the limits, there will be a bit increase in the labor share, but not much. So, but more interestingly is the last. So the last part you see on the material, that is this one. So what happens here? So I don't know how much you discuss this investment, so this story of recycling. So, but look, So I hope you remember it. So we have a stock of materials. Then there are the mining, you can extract some materials. And this allows us to create a stock of socioeconomic stock. That means the material that are used in the economy. Of course, there is a disposal rate. And so we have a stock of waste material. This is the stock where you can recycle. Okay. So it means that the assumption here is that you're not able to recycle all this waste material, but only a while. So, for instance, in this case, the assumption is that you're almost able, in general, to recycle about 40% at the end of the period. Okay, so we are improving the technology for recycling, this recycling rate, but this is not to produce, a recycling rate of 1 or something similar. Okay, there are some limits also in our ability of recycling. So the policy is very simple. Sorry, I have to upload the scenario. 6, recycling. Okay, so if you recycle our assumption, okay, is that you can recycle until the 60% of the waste material. So, and this will induce this big increase in the recycle rate. But when you look what happens to the recycled materials, the result is this one. So there is an increase, but it's an increase really teeny with respect to recycled material. So one question is why? The model helped us to understanding what's going on. I don't know. I found this result quite surprising this morning when I made this policy, and I thought that there was something wrong. Instead, the point is this one. You are recycling the 60% of what is in the material waste, so the waste materials, and then you are putting back in the socioeconomic stock only the 60%. So this means that if you're becoming more efficient in recycling, the stock of waste material declines. So this is so when you're recycling more, the waste, the stock from which you can take, the recycling is smaller. And this has a very important effect, is that what you are really recycling does not change so much. And this means that even the potential output that you can cover, with the materials is not changing at all, or almost. So, there is a small increase, okay? But this increase is really very little, almost neglectable. And so this means that recycling does not help at all in this model. You can try to correct him if you find something wrong, but you see that there is a couple of years more before reaching the crisis, okay? And this is a good exercise to understand what is wrong here. I think there is no anything wrong, only that the assumptions that we made are quite simple. And right, so the last topic is about climate change adaptation. This is even so which are the kind of action that we can think are helpful in that. So for one side, we are able to protect the negative, so the climate damage. So this is made in a very simple way. That is this one. So we can think that when you activate these policies, you have a reduction in the sensitivity of our economy to climate change. So this means that if you go back in the economy, you will see that here there is sensitivity to climate change. This sensitivity is reduced because we are planning some investment on some solution in order to avoid, destruction of capital. Now remember that this climate change affect the depreciation rate. This means that depreciation rate, so the capital that is depleted is less. Okay, so if you are able to do these adaptation policies, you expect that the effect of climate change is smaller than before, and the things are working pretty well. The other idea is that in order to make the same, so a reduction of the climate damage, instead of working on adaptation, you work on reforestation, so in increasing the stock of forest. And this can be done quite easily in the model, just because it's a toy model again. So this is a forest, and the other one is adaptation. Okay. And here, if you go to the ecology, you see that here carbon sequestration, when you do reforestation policies increasing, okay? So this help a little in reducing the carbon emission, ceteris paribus, of course, but not much, okay? So this means that, so this climate adaptation is just a reduction because, do you remember there is this positive effect of climate damage on output because there is an increase in investment. So if you reduce the climate, so if you are able to reduce the climate damage, you have a small reduction in emission, but also in output. And of course, with forest instead, you are increasing the possibility of so carbon sequestration that I showed you before, but it's quite clear, okay, what we are doing. And if you see the consequence in terms of climate damage, it's not very big, but are quite clear, I mean. So there is a little reduction in the climate damage thanks to the policy. Of course, again, this is we set some parameter. You can think to different parameters if they are credible, reliable or not. But of course, the model is not able to be, I mean, so realistic, let's say. So what happens in terms of output? If you see here, almost nothing. So you're not able to move the limits that we have, in this case, in materials, much so in a different way with respect to before. Okay, so just to make a sort of conclusion, and then I show you the last point. So we start from a baseline where material seems strongly, I mean, the limits. It seems that all these policies are not able to change or to avoid these limits, but probably if you are able to really dematerialize now the production with the material intensity policy, let's say. But however, there is another possibility. There is a sort of degrowth policy. So here we made a very more than simple, I don't know how to say, so very simplified assumption, that is this one. We assume that the degrowth policy is a sort of reduction in consumption in the propensity to consume that has two parameters here. One is from the labor income, and the other one is from the capital income. And we reduce both from a while. So I'll just show you the assumption that you have made. Okay. And you see that the propensity to consume out of, so they both reduce almost by half, okay, in the period of simulation. The same is true for workers. And so from labor income, what we can think is what happens to the final demand and output. You see that in this case, the output grow a little, so it's almost stopped growing. So there's a sort of post-growth economy. Then there is again a small increase. And this postpone the limits of the materials a lot, okay, until almost to period 87 or something like that. There are some negative consequences, of course they are. So I don't know, in the labor share just a little, okay, because of course this reduction of consumption made a reduction on the output and also reduction in unemployment, quite big, I would say. So this means that you can think if we can combine this policy with other policies, okay? And I didn't try it really, but of course you can try, for instance, one typical example that we do in some of the models is to couple this reduction of consumption with a reduction of working hours. We can also do it just direct, and then I stop. Working time reduction plus the growth. So now the only thing that you have to do in order to run this new scenario is just to put here 1 instead of 0, and the working time reduction 1. And we can see what happens. I really don't know. Maybe everything will crash. There's no crash in the toy model, let's say. And if you see what happens to the employment now, something like that. So this is the policy. And you see that there is a negative effect, is that the boundary is coming a bit before, but of course we are making employment much higher than before. And probably this is also something that we can see here, okay? So we counteract this labor share reduction. Of course, output would increase a bit with respect to the previous value, and this is playing the difference in the peak, let's say, in the reaching the material boundaries. Okay. So at the same time, maybe, so of course, if you increase also the wage, the things are getting better in terms of inequality, but of course, we'll end up in reaching the constraint a bit before. Okay, so I will stop here, and maybe we have a bit of time for discussion. Maybe if you want also to try something new. Okay. Any question or comment? Maybe I leave the Vensim model. So if you want to try something, we can do together. Any comment or question?
Hi, Simone.
Hi.
I have a comment. I really enjoyed this presentation, and the insight of that. Was it the waste materials, the recycled materials? That was really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a bit surprised, to be honest. So.
Yeah, it's not intuitive because it's a kind of systemic, more complex issue than it might seem first. And also, I was thinking, like, you had this consumption propensity from income and wealth, and that was reducing consumption. So it's kind of overall sufficiency policy on the demand side. But could you also complement that with supply side degrowth or sufficiency policies in some way in this framework?
Okay, maybe here we can do. It's easy. I mean, we can think to some. Policies. So one way. I mean. So of course here so as in all the economic growth model, investment play a very important role in both sides, no? Because you have the investment are so in sort of for the ones that are economists, it's a sort of Arrow-Domer model, no? So investment are both something that cover the final demand, but of course is what guarantee a new so capacity supply for the future, let's say. So maybe one thing could be what happens if you make investment less strong, because this allow you to have less demand, but also less supply, let's say, in the next year. Maybe we could try to model a policy that is a reduction in investment, at least, or
yeah.
So, I mean, there is something that is missing, of course, here, and I think is clear to all of you, is that these policies, there is no cost for these policies. An alternative could be what happens if, for instance, in the renewable energy policy, you are reducing the investment in the capital. So you take this 50 instead of from anything, maybe you are declining the investment in the output. That can be nice to see which is the effect. I don't know. I mean, so it's just to build the policy where these 50 are reduced by the investment in the outcome. That can be something nice. I don't know if it's exactly what you're. So it's not, maybe it's not sufficiency, but it's something that goes in the direction, let's say.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, is there feedback, since we're reaching the material limits in sometime in the future? Is there feedback that, like, does the economic system and the social system react?
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe I don't know if Guilherme didn't explain here, but what we were doing is to assume a sort of rationing rule. So it means that when the final demand is greater than the potential output, or the output is greater than the potential output, then you cut consumption and investment in proportion, and also government expenditure, to be honest. You see this. Sorry, I have a problem. I have to close the events and start it again because I start to. I hope. Okay. So I was saying. So if you see what's going, these rational rules is a reduction that is proportional for consumption and government investment in order to make demand meet the output. And this had a big crash in the system. Indeed, if you see the output, I don't know what. Okay, so here when you reach, this is the reason why everything collapsed, because you reduce the final demand as well, because of course you cannot, so we are not introducing prices here. Of course, prices can make the things a bit different, but not so much, in my opinion, because so this is the way in which we introduce this rational rule. Another comment, in the baseline here, we said that the big constraint is the material. If you change a bit the value of the scenario, and in the folder there are some parameters that can be changed, you could have that energy is the first thing to arrive, and then you can comment if the policy works better in maybe in making something a reduction of these limits. So this is a bit in the way in which you can still play with the model, because it's enough understandable, let's say.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comment?
Yeah, I had a similar question to what you were talking about at the end there. So I'm familiar with the Medius model, and in Medius, materials and energy is sort of the main thing that drives the problems. And I'm seeing that again here, and I'm curious, within the actual scenarios that you're building in locomotion, does climate damages become a bigger driver of the economic dynamics, or is it again mainly materials and energy?
No, I mean, so the climate damage is something strong, but probably most of the issue are coming from the, again, from the constraint of material and energy. But here, something a bit strange happens, of course, for the simplicity of the model itself, is that it's really a grow engine. That, to be honest, I like a bit, because it's a sort of defense in consumption, no? Since your capital is, so the depreciation increases, then you need more investment, and this more investment may growth. That is something that is not so I don't know if you read some of the theory about defensive consumption. There's a bit something important, in the sense that if you have some damage, then of course you have to increase the growth rate in order to fix it. And this, of course, allow you, so push you towards the limits. This is something that we have, again, in a very simplified vision, no? But so the issue is that it's not easy to deal with climate damage, because of course, the data, I would not say that they're not reliable, but of course there is a lot of uncertainty. So this means that, of course, we'll have a role that is important, especially in other. So here there is no. So what we find in other models is that, for instance, one important topic is about public debt that is not here. We decided to not model it, and there is another way in which really we can have a big new constraint, that is public finance, let's say, or public government expenditure. So there can be a very important feedback.
There's one question in chat.
Sorry, I couldn't see it. Wait, I lost the. Okay. Is real world okay, this is a big question. What do you think? So okay, I understood what happened. So the question is about the recycling dynamics. Okay, so just to clarify, I come back to the ecology side. So okay, I think we made something, of course, very simple, but it seems to work. You have some material that you can extract. Where you extract, you generate a stock that is the stock of this material that we are using. Then what next? That part of this socioeconomic stock is disposal, and you get this material waste, right? So this is the only thing that you can recycle. You cannot recycle things that you are using. You need to recycle what is, the waste of the displaced. That is not no more in the economy. So so of course, it's also true, I think, that what we are able to recycle is a share of this waste. And of course, the part that is not recycled is lost, definitely lost. So this means that as long as you increase the recycle, you reduce the stock of the waste that you can use for recycle. And this is a big limit. Maybe here is a bit exaggerated by the the simplified dynamics. But so again, imagine to be able to take 100 of, tons of whatever it is, lithium that you can, you want to recycle. Maybe you cannot recycle really all of it, or maybe depending on different materials, how I was explaining you, this kind of recycling rate is really different. This means that part is cannot recycle and is exit from even from the waste material stock, no, because it's not able to recycle itself. And then this means that as long as you are more able to recycle, this stock is becoming smaller and smaller. And this is really a big limit to the recycle. Maybe you can think that there are other ways of doing, or maybe that this waste material is increasing. But of course, remember that especially for the new materials that we are using for the energy transition, so we need to extract a lot of them. So we have not a big amount of waste. And so this means that probably it's still a limit. I don't know if maybe here is a bit too strong, let's say, but the logic of the feedback, it seems quite strong to me. And to be honest, I didn't thought, so I thought that there was this kind of limits about the waste that we have, but not that really recycling make this waste material, that is the availability of the recyclable material smaller, but it seems that it works at least. Something that was fine just for making the model, that at the beginning, if you see the model of day 3, we don't have this link from recycled material to socioeconomic stock. So I was thinking that the problem at the beginning was that we were not considering that the recycled material came back to the socioeconomic stock, and so again in the waste materials. And so when I added it, I was quite convinced to solve this problem. Instead, we didn't at all. It's almost the same. That is quite funny. In the sense, I don't know if it's really funny, but it's funny from a modeler point of view, not for an activist, let's say. Please.
In this model, the recycling rate is like 4 times greater than the disposal rate. So that's where you're depleting the waste material stock.
The recycling rate is about 60% of this.
If you graph the recycling rate,
I think I don't know, because I open. So it's the recycling rate plus the waste material. So you are reducing. You are recycling a lot if you increase the rate, but you lose some of this stock just because you are not able to recycle. So maybe this is one possible issue that. But remember that here you are. So what is exit from the waste is only what you recycling, not all. So there is no loss due to the fact that you are not able to recycle all. So that I think is quite obvious. Of course, you can think to increase the disposal rate, but this is something that Ole was discussing, that the life of this material, so in the socioeconomic stock, is quite long. Do you remember? So it means that maybe so the iron or the copper or maybe also the lithium, you can use it for at least 20 years before disposal. So this means that probably we're not planning to have this big increase in the waste. And so I don't know how much is the potential.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah, this is I think is nice. So I was quite happy this morning when I saw that there was this issue, because not all the policies are really effective in the same way, let's say. Okay, so just so if there are any other comments, otherwise I say one thing. So about the idea that we have in the MOOC is that if some of you want to take a sort of attendee certificate or something like that, it could be nice if you can. So these are a few of the things that we. So if you can make a sort of small project work. So we are not asking you much, but maybe you could think. So if you look at the model now, we will try to upload definitely documentation with the model, with the full model. But of course, the model is already on the folder. So you can think that there are some part of the model that really need to be improved in order to understand something, or you can think that there are some points that can be changed because they're not good enough, or you can add some other policies like something, a sort of cost of some policies or whatever you think is interesting. And maybe you can change the model, see what happens. and maybe just explain the change that you have done, but we are not expecting a paper. We are expecting a sort of discussion of why you made this change and which are the results. And so if you do it, we collect them, and maybe we let to the other. So since you remember that this smoke will be recorded and making the locomotion website, so we could have a folder with some of the projects that you have done that can be shared with the people that are interested in, in working in similar issues. Okay, so the drive probably you have in the document, so but it's open and you can upload the file on that. So we imagine maybe you have your final fancy model, and maybe with some comments. But I told you nothing special, but it can be a way of completing the MOOC, and then we will find a way to send you a sort of a certificate of the locomotion MOOC. Okay, is it clear? We are not asking many things, just to play a bit with this simplified model that you've done, and maybe you can just think. Maybe we'll do a collective publication at the end with the same model and your thoughts. Okay, so is clear enough? Any question on it? Okay, of course, me and David Cano and Guilherme will be available to help you if you want to work on it if there is something that is not clear. And at this point, I think we can. Okay, there is a deadline. Remember that the project ends up at the end of November. So at least for the project officer and the European Commission, we need to finish. So let's say that the formal deadline will be the end of November. Of course, if you do later, we will try to solve it. So solve this issue, but consider the end of November as the last moment. Okay. But of course, write me if there is any issue. We'll find a solution. Okay, it was really a pleasure. I hope that you enjoy. We organize a bit so we have not much time to organize this MOOC, but I hope that you enjoy this journey. And we understood that things are really difficult to do in the future, but so I think that this methodology can help. At the end of November, there will be also the toolkit available, so you can play also with the true model, not only with the toy one. And of course, so if you agree, we will send to you an email when the things will be updated, but I'm pretty sure that you will find the news on the locomotion website, but also in the social network and the way in which we communicate our result. So it was great that all of you were here. So I'm really happy for this MOOC. So thanks a lot. Bye.